everyone, welcome back to the Incredible India podcast series. I'm Sam, and sitting across from me is our expert, Taylor.
Hey there, glad to be here.
So, to start us off, I want you to picture this. You're sitting on a modern air-conditioned train, right? Cruising smoothly from Mumbai to Pune.
Oh, that's a great ride.
It really is. You're completely relaxed. Maybe you're snacking on a vada pav, that incredible local street food. A hot, deep-fried, spicy potato dumpling squished inside this soft bread bun with some fiery garlic chutney.
Making me hungry already.
Right, and you're just casually scrolling on your phone, glancing out the window at the sweeping, lush green landscape of the Western Ghats passing by. It's just the quintessential easy Indian travel experience.
It is a beautiful journey.
Yeah.
But, well, the mission of this deep dive is to entirely shatter that casual illusion for you.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. We're opening up historical sources today from a heritage tour that detail the largely forgotten, incredibly bloody story of the Bombay Railway.
Wow, okay.
We are talking about an audacious 19th century engineering marvel, built by 42,000 workers between 1856 and 1863. The story of how those literal iron rails got onto that mountain is just so staggering that once you hear it, you will never look out that train window the same way again.
Okay, let's unpack this, because nobody looks at a near-vertical cliff face in the Sahyadri Hills and thinks, oh yeah, perfect place for a steam train.
Exactly.
Unless, they are absolutely backed into a corner. We need to understand why the British East India Company was so desperate to conquer what was essentially an impossible geography.
You really have to view this through the lens of a massive global supply chain crisis.
Right.
If we zoom out to the 1850s, the British Empire's economy was essentially running on the textile mills in Lancashire and Yorkshire.
Okay.
They were the absolute engine of global manufacturing. And that entire engine ran on one single fuel, cotton.
Which, at the time, they were importing almost entirely from the plantations of the American South, right?
Correct. But there was this massive geopolitical storm looming. The American Civil War was right on the horizon.
Of course.
And British administrators knew that if a blockade happened, their primary supply of cotton would be completely cut off.
The Lancashire mills would just grind to a halt.
Exactly. The British East India Company panicked. They desperately needed an alternative source for this white gold, and they found it in India.
Specifically on the Deccan Plateau, yeah.
Yes, the volcanic black soil of Maharashtra's agricultural heartland was producing massive quantities of extraordinarily high-quality cotton.
So the cotton is sitting right there on the plateau, and the port of Bombay is waiting to ship it back to England. But there is a massive geographical nightmare standing in the middle, the Bombay Ghat.
A total nightmare.
It's this treacherous mountain pass in the Sahyadri Hills that rises over 1,800 feet in just 16 miles.
It's basically a wall.
Yeah. And up until this point, people were moving goods down that pass using, pack animals and bullock carts. It was incredibly slow and just really inefficient.
The administration realized that to move the volume of cotton required to actually save their textile industry, they needed a railway.
But the early surveyors looked at the route and literally laughed.
Oh yeah, geometrically, it just didn't make any sense.
Right.
The engineers did the math on the sheer steepness of the pass and officially declared a railway completely impossible.
And the physics behind why it was considered impossible are wild to me. A conventional train operates on what is called an adhesion railway.
Right.
It just uses the friction of its steel drive wheels pushing against the steel tracks to move forward. Normally, an adhesion railway maxes out at a gradient of about 1 in 75.
Meaning for every 75 feet it moves forward, it climbs 1 foot?
Exactly. But the Bombay Ghat Pass required a gradient of 1 in 40, and in some sections, a staggering 1 in 37.
Which fundamentally breaks the mechanics of a standard train.
It does. If you take a heavy iron locomotive and try to push it up a 1 in 37 slope, the steel wheels simply cannot grip the tracks.
They just spin.
Yeah, it's like trying to drive a massive freight train up a playground slide covered in oil. The wheels would just spin uselessly, and the sheer weight of the train would cause it to, slide backward down the mountain.
It's a terrifying image.
Mm-hmm.
But imperial greed and the terrifying prospect of those Lancashire mills shutting down, well, it pushed them to ignore the physics and attempt it anyway.
Wow.
Since they couldn't just power straight up the incline, they had to outsmart the geography. And to do that, they had to move a mind-boggling amount of earth.
The sources detail the excavation, and the numbers are just hard to wrap your head around.
They really are.
54 million cubic feet of hard basalt rock. And basalt is cooled volcanic lava. It is incredibly dense and unforgiving.
Extremely hard rock.
And they weren't using modern diesel excavators. They carved out those 54 million cubic feet by hand.
By hand, and with primitive black powder explosives.
It's unreal.
They also built 8 massive masonry viaducts, these huge stone bridges towering up to 160 feet high above the valley floor, just to keep the track level across the ravines.
Mm-hmm.
And they blasted 25 different tunnels, spanning a total of 2.5 miles straight through the solid mountain.
But, like, the excavation alone doesn't solve the playground slide physics problem, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Even with the tunnels and viaducts, the slope was still far too steep for a continuous climb.
Right. The real stroke of mechanical genius was how they dealt with the gradient itself. They built what is called a reversing station at Khandala.
Okay, yes.
This is a uniquely brilliant piece of Victorian engineering. Because a continuous straight climb was physically impossible, they realized they had to trade distance for a manageable gradient.
Okay, so how did that work?
They designed a zigzag pattern up the side of the mountain. The train would start its climb, pushing up a gradual incline, and arrive at the reversing station at Khandala. Then, the entire train would come to a complete dead stop.
Here's where the mechanics are so fascinating to visualize.
Yeah.
The locomotive would actually decouple from the front of the train. It would use a separate set of side tracks to travel all the way to the other end of the carriages and reattach itself to what used to be the back of the train.
Right.
Then, a railway worker would physically switch the tracks, and the train would ascend the next section of the mountain in reverse.
It was essentially a colossal switchback.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a good way to describe this, and it's basically like doing a grueling multi-point turn.
That's a great way to put it.
Imagine you are driving up a steep, incredibly narrow cliff-edge driveway, and the turn is too tight. You have to pull forward, stop, turn the wheel, and reverse up the next bit.
But instead of doing it in a modern car with power steering,
You were doing it with hundreds of tons of iron, steam, and cargo in the 1860s.
it was a phenomenal logistical achievement. That reversing station at Khandala was the key that unlocked the entire plateau.
Wow.
And the physical remnants of it are actually still standing today, largely abandoned in the hills above Lonavala.
Which I think brings us to the darker reality of this whole endeavor.
Yeah, definitely.
We can sit here and marvel at the brilliant mechanical puzzle of the reversing station all day, but blueprints don't blast tunnels.
No, they don't.
Human beings actually had to swing the pickaxes, haul the stone, and light the fuses to carve that zigzag into the hard basalt.
This is the part of the narrative the colonial administrators preferred not to dwell on.
Right.
Initially, the British planners assumed they could just bring over British contractors and manage a standard workforce. But the sheer brutal scale of carving out 54 million cubic feet of mountain made them realize very quickly that they needed an enormous local labor force.
The staffing numbers provided in our sources escalate so rapidly.
They do.
They started with 10,000 workers in 1856. The following year, it jumped to 20,000.
And by January 1861, they hit a peak of 42,000 laborers.
That is 42,000 people recruited from villages all across Maharashtra, essentially living and working on a 16-mile stretch of an active, highly dangerous construction site.
The logistics of housing that many people on a mountainside were practically non-existent.
I can't even imagine.
The sources describe massive, sprawling tent cities clinging to the hillsides.
Mm-hmm.
The laborers were completely exposed to the elements, and the environment was incredibly hostile.
Right, because the Western Ghats experienced some of the most intense weather shifts imaginable.
Absolutely.
During the monsoon season, those hills get battered by storms off the Arabian Sea. The tent cities and the construction trenches turn into treacherous rivers of mud, leading to massive landslides.
And then a few months later, the baking summer heat would set in.
Right.
The sun would beat down on that dark basalt rock until it was literally too hot for the workers to touch with their bare hands.
Oh my gosh.
Add to that the density of the population. When you have tens of thousands of people huddled together in makeshift camps without modern sanitation, disease is just inevitable.
Yeah, sweeping epidemics of cholera and malaria tore through those tent cities with devastating regularity.
Halting construction and wiping out entire sections of the workforce.
And that's before you even factor in the actual daily labor. We mentioned they were excavating by hand.
Yeah.
The physical mechanism of doing that in the 1850s is terrifying. To blast a tunnel, They used a technique called jumping.
Right.
Two workers would swing heavy sledgehammers at a long iron bar held by a third worker against the solid rock face. Strike, turn the bar slightly. Strike, turn the bar. They did this for hours just to drill a single hole.
And once the hole was deep enough, they would pack it with highly volatile black powder, set a slow match fuse, light it, and literally just run for cover.
And just like hope the fuse didn't burn too fast.
Exactly.
Then they have to rush right back into the suffocating cloud of dust and unstable debris to clear the rock and start all over again.
And let's not forget the viaducts. Thousands of these workers also had to build those 160-foot-tall stone viaducts while balancing on flimsy timber and bamboo scaffolding over massive gorges.
Given all these conditions, it's really no surprise that the sources indicate several thousand of those workers never returned home.
Which sets up a profound historical disconnect.
Yeah.
When you look at how the railway was officially celebrated, the contrast is jarring. The line was finally completed in 1863, and there was a spectacular opening ceremony at Khandala on April 21st.
Yeah.
The governor of Bombay, Sir Bartle Frere, gave the keynote address.
The sources outline his speech, and the framing is just a masterclass in colonial propaganda.
Oh, entirely.
He openly praised the, quote, English engineers. He declared that the railway was bringing India out of an era of bullock carts and into the modern steam age.
He actually compared the railway tunnels to the ancient sacred cave temples of Western India,
Oh.
essentially framing the train tracks as the new, superior religion of British benevolence.
It was an event explicitly designed to project dominance. The underlying message was, look at the superhuman feat we have accomplished for you.
But what he completely omitted from the official record were the thousands of Indian laborers standing just out of frame, the people who actually paid for that superhuman achievement with their blood.
Right.
There is no record of compensation for the families of the fallen, and their names are almost entirely unrecorded.
So what does this all mean for us today? I mean, imagine standing at that opening ceremony, hearing a politician praise British benevolence while, thousands of families were mourning nearby.
It's haunting.
It forces you to ask, how do we reconcile the brilliant engineering we still use today with the tragic exploitation that built it?
You cannot separate the engineering triumph from the human cost. They are permanently locked together in that basalt rock.
Yeah. And speaking of people the governor omitted from his grand speech, the Indian laborers weren't his only blind spot.
That's right.
While he was busy praising the male English engineers, he completely ignored the most shocking figure pulling the strings behind the scenes.
This is such an incredible part of the story.
Because the person who actually managed the construction project when it nearly collapsed was a 36-year-old Victorian woman.
This detail from the sources completely changes the narrative of Victorian civil engineering. Her name was Alice Treadwell.
I have to admit, when I first read her name in the notes, I had to double-check the dates. The idea of a Victorian woman in the 1860s managing the biggest, most dangerous civil engineering project in Asia sounds like historical fiction.
It really does.
How did she end up with the contract?
Well, it started with her husband, Solomon Treadwell. He was a highly respected railway contractor who won the colossal bid for the Bombay Ghat incline.
Okay.
Solomon and Alice arrived in India together in 1859 to take over the project. But within a single month of arriving, Solomon contracted dysentery or cholera and died.
Wait, in a single month?
A single month. He was dead before he oversaw a single day of actual construction.
Oh my gosh. So Alice is 36 years old. She is suddenly a widow in a foreign country, and she inherits his estate, which includes a staggering 70,000 pounds.
In 1859, that is an absolute fortune.
Every single societal expectation dictated her next move. She could have easily paid whatever penalty fees were required to break the contract, packed her bags, and gone back to Staffordshire, England, to live out her days in total luxury.
To walk away would have been the completely rational, expected choice.
Yeah.
Women in the mid-19th century were not permitted to hold massive industrial contracts, let alone manage a workforce of tens of thousands on a dangerous mountainside.
But instead of fleeing, Alice chose to assume the contract herself.
She did.
And what fascinates me is the sheer logistical nightmare of how she managed it. She didn't stay on the mountain. She appointed two highly capable proxies managers named Adamson and Clouser to handle the day-to-day operations on site.
Right.
Then Alice returned to England and successfully ran this unimaginably complex project for 7 years, entirely by correspondence.
We have to remember what by correspondence meant in 1860.
Yeah.
There was no telegraph line directly connecting her to the construction site. A letter had to travel by steamship across the Mediterranean, overland across Egypt, and down the Red Sea to Bombay.
It would take a month just for her to receive an update on a tunnel collapse or a labor strike, and another month for her instructions to reach them.
That is slow-motion crisis management.
It requires a phenomenal amount of strategic foresight and absolute trust in the team you appointed.
Absolutely.
And the underlying sexism she faced from the industry is right there in the historical record.
Oh, there is a quote from a prominent Victorian engineer from the era who noted that Alice Treadwell took up the contract with a, quote, remarkable degree of spirit and judgment.
Which, sure, sounds like a nice compliment today, but in the highly guarded, male-dominated professional language of 19th century civil engineering, that isn't polite praise.
No, not at all.
That is barely concealed utter shock. They fundamentally could not compute that a woman possessed the administrative competence to pull this off.
And her administrative skills aren't even the most groundbreaking part of her legacy. Alice Treadwell also meticulously documented the construction of the railway line using photography.
This blew my mind. We are talking about the years between 1859 and 1863. Photography was barely 20 years old as a medium.
Yeah.
She wasn't just snapping pictures with a pocket camera. She was using the wet collodion process.
Exactly. The technology of the time was incredibly demanding. You couldn't just load film.
Right. You had to take heavy, fragile glass plates, coat them in sticky, highly volatile chemicals inside a pitch-black tent, rush them out to a massive wooden camera, expose the shot, and then rush it back into the darkroom to develop before the chemicals dried.
And doing that in a sterile London studio was hard enough.
Right?
Imagine doing it on a humid, dusty cliff edge in the Sihadri Mountains surrounded by active blasting.
And because she went through that immense trouble, her photographs are recognized today as some of the earliest documentary photographs of a major civil engineering project anywhere in the world.
Which is an incredible legacy.
It's like inheriting a failing Fortune 500 company in a foreign country overnight when the entire society expects you to just go home and knit. And not only do you save the company, but you also pioneer a brand new technology to document it.
Yeah.
Yet she was totally erased from the governor's opening speech.
Totally ignored. She died just 4 years after the railway opened, at the age of 44, and her name is essentially a footnote in standard accounts.
That's so tragic.
Thankfully, her photographs survived and are currently preserved in the archives of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers in London, serving as the ultimate proof of her involvement.
It really highlights the hubris of the Victorian era. They threw 42,000 workers, thousands of pounds of gunpowder, and millions of cubic feet of excavated rock at this mountain to claim it as their own triumph.
Right.
But the deep irony revealed in the sources is that they were actually about 2,000 years late to the party.
This is where we see a fascinating shift in the historical perspective.
Yeah.
The British narrative treated the Boer like an untamed wilderness they had bravely conquered. But the truth is, this exact pass was a bustling superhighway centuries before the British East India Company ever panicked about cotton.
If we look back 2,000 years, during the Satavahana dynasty, the pass was already heavily trafficked.
Oh, I have
Buddhist monks and wealthy merchants were walking this exact geographical fault line on foot, trading goods between the ports on the Konkan coast and the wealthy cities of the Deccan Plateau.
The profits generated from that ancient continuous trade route were immense. And that wealth was used to fund the creation of some of the most breathtaking ancient architecture in the country.
Specifically, the Karla and Baja caves.
Exactly.
And these aren't just natural caves. These are incredibly intricate structures carved directly into the basalt cliff faces of the Western Ghats. For context, the Karla Cave complex features a massive chaitya hall,
which is a remarkable structure.
For those who might not know, a chaitya hall is an ancient Buddhist prayer hall containing a stupa at one end. The one at Karla is the largest and best-preserved rock-cut hall in all of India.
The artistic ambition required to carve an entire cathedral-sized interior, complete with vaulted roofs and intricate pillars out of solid rock using ancient hand tools, is astonishing.
Truly.
It proves that the mountain was a center of immense human activity and ingenuity long before steam power existed.
And understanding that ancient route connects perfectly to how the region operates today.
It really does.
That same geographical choke point, first walked by monks, then blasted by the British for a railway, is the reason modern Maharashtra looks the way it does. The railway line that followed the ancient Buddhist path ended up totally transforming the city of Pune.
Right. It shifted from being a primarily military and administrative outpost into the thriving cultural and commercial capital it is today.
It also laid the logistical groundwork for some of the most famous modern traditions in India.
Yeah, take the Dabbawallas in Mumbai, for example.
Yeah. Oh, I love this part. The lunchbox delivery network.
Exactly. Every single day, they deliver approximately 200,000 hot, home-cooked lunches from the outer suburbs directly to offices across the bustling city with near-perfect accuracy.
200,000, that's just amazing.
And that massive, highly choreographed logistics network relies entirely on the local train lines. It is a direct descendant of the commercial connectivity enabled by conquering the Borgat incline.
And the railway even made the ancient, globally renowned Ajanta and Ellora caves and Aurangabad accessible to widespread international tourism.
What's fascinating here is that it is the ultimate proof that geography is destiny.
Yeah.
The mountain pass was always the vital key to the plateau. The Buddhists walked over it, the Victorians blasted their way through it, and today, modern commuters ride air-conditioned trains right across it.
The technology just sped up the journey, but the topographic necessity of that exact path was always there, dictating human behavior.
It forces a massive perspective shift. The mountain doesn't care about the empire. The empire has to adapt to the mountain.
Exactly. So the next time you are sitting on a train looking out the window or driving on a newly paved highway, or even looking at an old black and white photograph in an archive, take a second to ask yourself,
Whose invisible hands actually swung the hammers to carve that path?
and whose names were deliberately left out of the grand speeches on opening day? Because history is never just what is neatly written on the official bronze plaque.
It is a perfect, humbling reminder that every single modern convenience we casually take for granted is built on deep, overlapping layers of forgotten human sacrifice, brilliant ingenuity, and geographical destiny.
If you decide to travel to India, we have a recommendation. Five Senses Tours organizes tours across India, which are immersive cultural experiences. You can email contact@fivesensestours.com. Note 5 is written as a numeral in contact at fivesensestours.com. Or WhatsApp to +919 845 677 446.